Welcome to Breaking the Standard, where we are closing the communication and knowledge gap for small businesses and GovCon. I'm Aubrey Gainfort, and today we have very special guest Alexa Tsui with us. Alexa, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm definitely excited to be here.
Yeah, so if you could just introduce yourself for our listeners, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. I've been in GovCom about 20 years. I was just doing the math back on all the different roles I've had and everything I've done. I was like, wow, it's been almost 20 years. So I first started my career at a company called Input, and that would date me for anybody that knows. So that's how funny that is. But yeah, so I'm excited to be here. Definitely have done a lot of different things in the industry, everything from market intelligence to BD to capture to news to just all over the map. So this is going to be an exciting conversation.
No, I'm excited to have you here, and I just recently got connected to you, and so getting to see like how passionate you are about the GovCon and GovCom space, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But I also can't believe you've been in the field for that long, because if anybody that's listening to this is, I'm looking at her and she doesn't look old enough to have been in government for that long. So, but today we're going to be discussing changing the narrative of GovCon in 2024. So, what's the current narrative before we talk about like what you would want to change about it? Like, how would you explain the current narrative of GovCon?
This is a good question, and I've been thinking a lot about it since you had sent me that question in advance, and thank you for that. So I think right now the government contracting community is very much GovCon focused as far as they have their goals that they want to achieve, their OKRs and their metrics and all the things that they need to hit, whether they're a product company or a services company or whatever it is, right? Everybody has their things that they're super focused on, and everybody's like, let's double down this year and triple our revenues and this and that. And um then of course let's go ahead and use chat gpt to write all of our LinkedIn stuff. And so the problem with this, as I can see you nodding your head at me, is this really doesn't leave a lot of room for the mission, right? If we don't go back to our why do we work in the government space to begin with? I think we need to go back to the basics. I think we
Hmm.
need to go back to what called us here to begin with. And it really does go back to my passion. And I am super nerdily passionate about this industry. This is big facts. So,
No, I can see that. And I mean, even in like the short time I've gotten to know you, and like I will link her profile to LinkedIn in the show notes, but if you just go read her about me, I think that sums her up in a nutshell. But it's really interesting that you talk about going back to the basics. So, like, what would that look like in terms of, you know, building community? Because you're a community person. In the short time I've gotten to know you, you're all about building community, and I see that changing it from like GovCon to GovCom, which we've talked about a little bit, it would really like kind of expand the potential for community there. But what would the basics look like? Because as someone who's been in contracting for 15 years, I've only seen it one way. So I'm really interested to see like what you think that would look like.
right. I think it's a great question. So I used to use the tag GovCon all the time. And in fact, I even was so proud of myself because I felt like I had started that one too, but I probably didn't. But I felt like I did because I'd used it so much and so often for so long. But the thing is when you say GovCon, you're really talking about the government contracting community as a whole. Like I'd mentioned, services and products and the vendors and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're missing in that equation is the actual government themselves.
Hmm.
So our contractors, our contracting officers, our acquisitions people, our mission people, are the people that are leading frontline, our CIOs, are the folks that are direct contractors back to the government. I think they're called PLCs. I think that's what they're called, PSCs maybe. But like those folks, right? We're missing that whole piece of it. And if we're only focused so much on this space over here, what's good for GovCon, we're leaving out the Gov piece, the actual GovCom, the community of government folks that we really need to bring together as one. So,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I didn't have this epiphany all by myself. I wish I could say that I had that super smart epiphany, but one of my government contract, no, he's not on the contracting side, he's on the government side. One of my government friends reached out to me and said, "You keep using this word, GovCon." And he said, "You wouldn't believe this, but it feels very exclusive to me because I don't work on that side of it. I am a government employee, which makes me feel like you're not talking about me." And that was the epiphany I needed. That was it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because inclusivity, building community, making sure that everybody has a space and feels welcome are things that matter to me. And if you've ever seen me at an event, you know, I like to, it's funny. People are always like, "Oh, you're holding court." I don't mean to hold court. I just want people to know I'm a safe space. You can come and talk to me, and you know, I probably won't be the one chasing you down. But if you want to
Right.
come talk to me, I'm happy to have a chat, right? But as soon as he said that to me, I said, "You know what? We need a new hashtag. We need hashtag GovCom." And he was like, "Absolutely." And then he's been the biggest proponent behind that. In fact, he's been hitting me up trying to get me to start a LinkedIn community called GovCom. And I might do it. I don't know. We haven't really, or we have our meeting set for next week, but I thought it was such a brilliant idea that he had, and I will always give him credit for that.
Looking at it from the other side for a second, because I didn't think about that until you just shared his perspective. I never thought about it like that from as a government employee. From the show side, I've always just ever known it as GovCon,
Right.
just because it's a hashtag that's been used for a very long time. But I can see from his perspective where, you'd either have to take off the con and just have gov, but then
Right.
that's just government. So it's like, well, what do you do then? So the com part would be community. So that would encompass everyone. So I love this. I guess I'm curious, like, what difference do you think that would make in terms of like how things are right now and how things potentially could be if like we change the narrative and we change it from GovCon, because we all know it's government contracting,
Mhm.
to GovCom? Like, I'm just trying to think, like, like daydreaming, like what would that look like? What kind of difference would that make for like government and industry to be able to like, come together and have conversations or have events or,
Right.
all of the above.
Yeah, I think this speaks to your overall question on this particular podcast, which is,
Mhm.
how is the narrative changing? So if we go back to pre-COVID, right? People that do BD and capture, and I was one of them. You know, I was badged into, I think, 6 different agencies at one time. So, you know, one day I'd pull out my census badge and I'd be at the Department of Census meeting with the customers and sitting down and meeting with potential teaming partners and hitting up some contracting officers and dropping off cookies over here and visiting the team and doing the things. And then the next day I'd show up at NASA, and the next day I'd show up over here. You know, I was badged into a lot of different agencies, the SEC, you know, all at the same time. But then COVID happened, and you'll notice it was like the rise of the marketing manager in small business government contractors. That role did not exist. And
Mm-hmm.
now, looking at companies like Steampunk, Riva, even where I used to work, Metaphase, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've gotten very, very good at crafting their message on LinkedIn about who they are, how they do it, what differentiates them. And they've done that because the government is no longer hanging out in their offices. And so we had to figure out a different way to kind of get the messaging together and get it out in front of the government. I promise I'm getting to the answer to your question.
You're good.
Kind of
I'm good.
setting the stage a little bit. So along with the rise of the marketing manager, there also has been a little bit of a change in the way that the government interacts with industry, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. So I've noticed that there are a lot of small events popping up where the government comes out not as their role, but they come out as who they are as humans.
Hmm.
and they show up with a name badge that has their name on it, but it might not have their agency or their role. And then, therefore, the conversations you're then having at these events are very different than if somebody had like a CIO of the Social Security Administration. He's really cool too, by the way. But, I'm starting to see the government show up very differently at events. And whether it's undercover events like, Cyber Smoke, or, the GovLink events where people kind of show up and your name badge says whatever it says.
Mm-hmm,
Or
mm-hmm,
if it's something like Act IX ELC, where the government does have their name badges and comes together and gets together, I feel like the government is owning their own narrative for the first time in a long time. And
mm,
that's really exciting to see. So that, combined with COVID, combined with the changing tides of everything, I think is why we need to go back to the basics of what is it that we're doing here, right? What problems are we solving and why does it matter, right? We're here
mm,
to improve citizen services.
mm-hmm,
That's what we're doing. So, you know, a company's bottom line or their OKRs or any of that other stuff, like, that's not the driving force. It shouldn't be. Like, what are we able to get done here and why?
mm-hmm,
Should be.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so simplistic, but I like it because, at the end of the day, like, and we've talked a lot about this on the show, is that if you want to work with the government, one of the recommendations that's constantly made is to understand the target customer. If you
Right.
know what your target customer is and what they serve or the requirements that they have, and then suggestions on how you can help them to achieve that, that's what will get you further down the line than, being one of those companies that just wants to make a dollar. And it sounds really simplistic, but I think, in listening to what you said, we have gotten away from that. I haven't gotten to see as much of it only recently from being able to like learn everything I've gotten to learn from the show. But on my federal side, I don't get to see that. Like, I don't get to see the change. And I know it's changed a lot in the last 15 years. It'll probably continue to change, but I kind of like where you're pointing to think maybe what it would look like, just to say like, this is what we need, and how can you help us to achieve that, and not have it be like, whose car is the shiniest, and or who can buy me a Maserati versus like a Honda. Like, it shouldn't matter. Like, that part shouldn't matter. Like,
Right.
yes, of course, contracting terms and all that other crap, changes it a little bit, but at the end of the day, I feel like if you have that baseline figured out, like you're inferring, then I think the rest of it would follow. Um, so in a perfect world, I'm wondering, like, if we got into like going back to basics, and I really wish we did more of this, because like, we really industry interactions I've only gotten to do like on the other side, or like, industry days, or like pre-solicitation conferences, or that kind of thing. So like, I feel like this would be like way before that, potentially. Or I have done one-on-ones for like market research purposes, but I wonder what it would look like in that sense, because I love being able to go to those types of things where you have, an honest question, and there's no like, oh my God, I can't believe you asked that. Or it's like they're genuinely trying to learn or try to understand. And like,
Right.
and there's a lot of times where the government has gotten flack because they don't answer industry's questions. And um, I am speaking on my own volition at the moment. There are a lot of times that there is only so much that can be said in the capacity that you're trying to ask the person that you want to get information from. It's not that they don't want to tell you. It's just there is only so much that we can legally say at that time.
Right. Right.
I feel like this would alleviate all of that.
Right. Yeah. So I think, let me answer the question directly, is like, what would good look like? Or what would even better look like? What would the next step look like? One of the things I'm going to do in my new role and you haven't mentioned it yet, which I
No,
which
hey, it's a good segue because this is my last episode of 23. And when this airs, Alexa's actually going to officially be where?
I will be the new chief operating officer for G2X.
Which is very, very exciting. So you'll be able to see that on her LinkedIn profile when you look her up in the show notes. But congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. One of the things that I think is my, I think my biggest North Star for that role is to open up avenues of communication between the government and industry. And I'll tell you, I'm gonna like WikiLeaks one of my biggest things I'm gonna try to do, which is to launch a official community called the Vibe. And whenever I explain the Vibe and what it is and what I'm going to try to do with it, it seems like a big bet. It's not really that big of a bet. I mean, it's an online platform that we're going to connect to G2X and blah, blah, blah. And yes, it's technology. It's cool. Yay. But here's the thing. Imagine the government puts out a big bet RFP, kind of like USDA Stratus, where USDA was like, we want to be the binom for off cloud for any government agency in the government, right? That was a big bet RFP, man. I have never seen an agency, especially one like USDA, stand up and try to do that. So they put out 200 and they had 225 questions and answers. And I was like, man, I wish there was a way I could go live and have all of industry attend at one time and invite the contracts and the program folks to listen in to our conversation. Imagine how that changes the narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Q&A is public. Okay, cool. All right, I go on the Vibe, I go live, I invite everybody else to kind of join in, and the people will pop in left, right, and center. I invite the disc folks from USDA to come and listen in, and we go question by question, answer by answer, and then we start talking as industry, and then the government can hear our thought process, and if the government has a question to what we're talking about or wants to jump in and add to it, then we have a whole elevated conversation. No, that's just like one example.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, and the one side of me, it's like, how do you delineate that from being like discussions? But it's not a discussion, it's more of like a clarification, because being able to it would make a real difference, I think, across the board, to be able to hear the interpretation of things versus
Exactly.
reading it and then you answer the question, which sometimes the government's great at and sometimes they're not. And then there's like a follow-up question, and so it's like we didn't really get to answer your question, or we can't answer at this time. And so it's like, I think that would make a huge difference. So I'm curious to see how things like that will roll out, because I just don't like I don't know when, but I would love for something like that to happen. But I have two more questions for you that I ask everybody on the show.
Absolutely.
Is there any advice that you would give to businesses working in GovCon? Like, what would you say to them if they're currently already working in GovCom, or if they want to work in GovCom? Like, what would you say to them?
I would say, first of all, don't do it if you don't love it.
Mm-hmm.
If you do not love this industry, if you don't wake up super passionate about it, go make money doing something else somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Because this
Mm-hmm.
is citizen services at its best. Everything that we do should be tracked back to the mission for that specific purpose. And if you don't care, or if you're not tied into that, or for whatever reason you don't consider yourself a stakeholder as a taxpayer, I mean, which is another thought process I can't get behind, then I would say find something else to do. Because whenever I hear people complain about this industry, I'm always having to find myself in a different conversation really quick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the second thing I would say is, this industry takes time. This takes a lot of time to build your network, find, if you want to break in through the subcontracting route, it takes time to build those relationships with your primes. And if you do want to go that route, it takes time to flip it into your own prime contract, and then how do you even do that, right? So I would say this is funny that anybody that knows me personally would laugh at me even saying this word. It takes patience. And that's not something I'm known for at
Yeah,
all.
no, it's a marathon in this industry. It's not, overnight success. You get one contract, you put all your eggs in one basket. It's not like that. So I agree with you. It does take a lot of patience. So I've really enjoyed having you on. I was so excited to have you come join us. And if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
On my LinkedIn profile, there's like a book a meeting. There's like a new button that's like book a meeting, and that's connected to my calendar.
Mhm.
So that goes directly to my calendar, and I will show up and meet with whoever wants to chat.
And she will. And so if you have any other questions for me or for Alexa, please email me at breakingthestandard@gmail.com and make sure to go check us out on LinkedIn and listen to us on Apple and Spotify. And until next time, bye.